my name is Sarah, and today we are talking about Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. Homegoing is Yaa Gyasi's debut novel. It was published on June 7th of this year to much critical acclaim, and I have to tell you, it is worth every bit of the hype that it received. The book is a literary fiction family saga that starts in the 1700s and follows two half-sisters from Ghana named Afia and Essie, and follows their families through the generations up to present day. Afia and her descendants stay in Ghana, while Essie is sold into slavery and her descendants grow up in the United States. Unlike many literary fiction novels, we don't follow one specific protagonist throughout the story, but rather we start back in the 1700s with Afia's individual story, and then we get Essie's individual story. And from there, we move through the generations, getting a pair of people from each generation of Afia and Essie's descendants, one of Afia's descendants and one of Essie's descendants, as we go from generation to generation to generation and eventually wind up in the present day. To start with, the writing in this novel is absolutely exquisite. Yaa Gyasi has a style that is both fluid and lovely to read, while also being incredibly unflinching in its discussion and portrayal of the many different things that the generations of these two half-sisters had to deal with through the years. When it comes to stories like this that are told in the sort of short story format where you don't spend a ton of time with individual characters, I am usually not a huge fan, and that is largely because I am a very character-driven reader, and I often find that with that kind of story there is a disconnect and that I am not able to feel connected to the individual characters because you just don't spend a lot of time with them. And that was both the case and not the case with this particular novel. There are some characters that I felt were developed incredibly well and I really connected to, and I absolutely loved their stories, and I really wished that I could just read an entire novel about their stories. But there were some others that you simply just spent less time with, not necessarily in page count, but in actual span of their life. And so I didn't necessarily feel like some of those characters were quite as well developed as different ones, and as a result didn't connect to their individual stories as much. So it was for the most part a story that I really loved, and getting to know character after character and generation after generation, and seeing how the events of the previous generations continued to affect each individual character that we followed was incredibly fascinating. Though I did enjoy all of the different stories that we follow from generation to generation, the three favorites that I really loved were the stories of Afia, Kojo, and Marjorie, and I could absolutely have read full-blown novels on all three of those characters, especially Afia and Marjorie. That is something else that I really loved, is there's not necessarily more or less men or women that are featured as protagonists in this story, but so many of the women that are featured as protagonists in these sort of short stories are so strong in the face of so much adversity, and I just absolutely loved that representation there. Despite the fact that there were some characters I don't necessarily feel were developed quite as much, still all of the characters have very solid development, and I don't necessarily feel like they were poorly developed. It's just that some were more developed than others. I think the thing that I loved most about the story, and one of the reasons that it is receiving such critical acclaim, is that in addition to being incredibly well crafted both in its writing style and the character development and the stories that we follow, the entire arc of the story and the themes that run from generation to generation to generation and are paralleled in the two different lineages of each half-sister is just absolutely exquisite to read. Obviously, when you are looking at the history of the half-sister Essie, who was sold into slavery and sent to the United States, there are many different things that you are going to encounter, like slavery in the Civil War, the aftermath of the antebellum period, the civil rights movement, and the like. But the thing that I had somewhat forgotten since I took history in middle school and high school and all that jazz was that slavery of Africans was not just an issue that took place in the United States. Before slaves were sold and sent to the US, the Europeans had already come to Africa, and people from one African tribe would capture people from other African tribes and sell them to the Europeans into slavery. And that is how many of the Africans wound up being sold to the United States, but some of them did stay in Africa and were forced into slavery in their own homeland. And I think one of the things that was so fascinating about this story to read is that you see that despite the fact that they are living on completely different continents, they are growing up in different cultures and the like, they're still struggling with similar issues. And the Black Americans that are portrayed are no more or less virtuous than their half-sisters counterparts who are living in Ghana. And when she discusses so many different things from slavery in the United States to slavery in Ghana to the colonization that the Europeans did, she discusses them in such an unflinching way, but she neither excuses nor scolds. She doesn't romanticize. She just tells the story for what it is, and it's it really is just an absolutely exquisite novel, and I am sure that there are elements of the story and themes and ideas that will come forth in future readings of this story, because it is absolutely one that I will come back to again and again in the future, that I am positive of. For my official rating, my gut reaction after I finished the story was 4.5 stars, and then I kept thinking about it more, so I bumped it up to 5 stars, which is what I gave it in my wrap-up. But the more that I've been thinking about it, I realized that there was a bit of a disconnect between me and some of the characters and things like that, and so I sort of felt like I should bump it back down to 4.5 stars. So my official rating, though somewhat pedantic, is 4.75 stars. But the fact of the matter is, this is a beautifully crafted novel with some very compelling characters and a really compelling, important story that needs to be told. On top of that, it is an own voices novel, as Yaa Gyasi is herself from Ghana, and truly, truly, if you have not checked this one out yet, I highly recommend picking it up. Well, there you have it, friends. That is my review of Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. If you have read the book, I would love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know in the comments below. And if this review has inspired you to pick it up, please let me know as well. If you want to follow me elsewhere online, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Goodreads, all at Sarah Ann Hayes. The links for those profiles will be in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye! Today we are talking about whack myself in the face with a book.